Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining. While we wait for people to trickle in, I'd like to take a moment to thank Cecilia for joining us today. Cecilia is a senior content developer at Microsoft and is knowledgeable in a broad range of topics, including security, data, and networking, with extensive experience in product management, project management, and R&D. Now, I was lucky enough to take a sneak peek at the presentation, and I can assure you, this is going to be a great session. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to Opsgility. We are proud Microsoft partners and hold several gold and silver competencies in security, DevOps, data, and much more. We leverage this knowledge and experience to guide organizations along their digital transformation journey through our suite of solutions. First, as a Microsoft Learning Partner, we can work with your organization to identify skill gaps and align Microsoft official courseware to create custom learning solutions with the scale and flexibility to meet your skilling needs. Next, we enable organizations to deliver engaging virtual events with OneVenue, our virtual and hybrid event platform. OneVenue is an end-to-end solution that's built on Microsoft Teams and gives event organizers the tools to create multi-day, multi-track events in minutes. Our team of producers can fully manage your event design, speaker rehearsal, and custom stream configuration to ensure a seamless delivery. Finally, as consultants, we can support your organization's IT infrastructures through custom solutions built with Microsoft's suite of products and services. Whether you're looking for guidance to select licenses, subscription management, IT project support, or access to a sandbox environment for dev tests, we got you covered. But without further ado, I'll pass things over to Cecilia. Cecilia, take it away.
Thanks, Marquez. I appreciate it. So as Marquez mentioned, my name is Cecilia Perez-Benitoa. I'm a senior content developer in Microsoft's Worldwide Learning Organization, and specifically the Global Technical Learning team. And within that team, I'm responsible for the Microsoft Security Compliance and Identity Fundamentals training content, which is aligned to a certification, which is really the topic of this presentation. But before I jump into the details of what's covered in that content, I want to take a few minutes to provide some context as to why this matters, why this content matters. And let me just do a quick audio check. Marquez, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I want to start with the Microsoft Cloud. The Microsoft Cloud with its various cloud offerings, as you can see in the diagram, whether that's Azure, Microsoft 365, Power Platform, Dynamics, these are all a set of offerings that are really designed to address a company's digital transformation needs. And a foundation upon which these offerings are built is security, compliance, identity, and management capabilities. And the individuals and the teams who provide security for that digital landscape of a company really enable that cloud journey at whichever level they're engaged. So that's an important context. Now, we all know that the security of an organization's digital landscape and the ability to manage that ecosystem, that's been around for a long time. That's really nothing new. But clearly, we are living in a very different world than we were just 2 years ago, right? And I'm not just talking about how the pandemic has changed the way we work. It's really so much more than that, right? Think about what's happening geopolitically. Cyberspace is a theater of war at a scale that's really unprecedented and is only increasing. And so as a result of that, traditional, conventional security tools really aren't enough. They haven't kept up. Also, the cost and impact of the breaches are increasing. Consider just a couple of years ago, right, the Colonial Pipeline shutdown and the impact it had on this country on the East Coast. So as governments try to keep up, right, regulatory rules are constantly changing. The cost of compliance is increasing. There are over 1,000 regulatory bodies around the world that release over 217 updates per day. So keeping up isn't easy, right? And so the net of that is that cybersecurity isn't an option. Some interesting statistics, right? Email is responsible for about 91% of all cyber attacks. And cybercrime is predicted to cost the world about $10.5 trillion by 2025. Now, with all these challenges, there are opportunities, right? Digital job growth is increasing. For the period that started in 2020 through up to 2025, the projected growth in jobs is 149 million net new digital jobs. And so every IT position is also now a cybersecurity position. And we know this not just from the statistics, but we also see it in the news headlines, right? As you can see here, I did a quick search on this topic recently, and the headlines really say it all. And by the way, these are all current headlines. There's one headline that you see here on this slide that's from November of 2021, but all of the other ones are really within the last 6 months. And you could find many more of these. And so the net of it is that there are 3.5 million job openings in this space in cybersecurity, and companies are desperate to fill jobs in this area. And so training and certification that prove an individual's skill in this area are becoming so much more critical. Right. So, and you can see here some of the statistics based on studies on the value of a certification. I'm not going to go through these. You can see them on the slide, but the context, I think, really helps sets the stage for why this topic on Microsoft security, compliance, and identity training and certification is really important. So with that, let me jump into the actual content here. I'll be focusing on the fundamentals, but also wanted to give you a complete view of the portfolio of training and certification for the security area. In addition to the fundamentals, Microsoft offers role-based certifications at both the associate level and the expert level. And all our certs are designed to meet industry and market needs with roles and skills and capabilities needed for the job, including hands-on experience and practice requirements. And I'll talk a little bit more about that process a little bit later on this presentation, but let's focus on the fundamentals. Right. Who is this for? The fundamentals is really for a very broad audience. It's for those that are new to IT and see their career opportunities in this space, right? The headlines say it all. And really want to align their learning with Microsoft as an industry leader. It could be for someone that's experienced in IT, but needs to familiarize themselves with Microsoft solutions. It could be for students. And let's not forget the business stakeholders, right? We've probably all been in some kind of situation where you're in a meeting and you kind of get that feeling of being a deer in the headlights, so to speak, right? Because someone's talking about something and you really feel lost, right? Well, no business stakeholder can afford to be in that situation when it comes to the security of the organization, especially in the current environment. So we see that this audience is really quite broad, right? And similarly, the content is quite broad, and that's by design. In fact, a description that I like to use when I talk about the fundamentals is that it's a mile wide and an inch deep. And again, that is by design. It's really the place to start to get a high level understanding of the Microsoft security, compliance, and identity solutions that are the foundation of the Microsoft Cloud, that slide that I showed at the beginning. And you can see here just a few of the products that are featured as part of that training content: Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft 365 Defender, Purview, and many more. And there are a couple of things I want to just call out that I think are worth mentioning. There are no prerequisite certifications required to take this certification. Now, because the certification does span both Microsoft 365 and Azure, it is helpful to have a very basic understanding or general knowledge of Azure and Microsoft 365, but there's no prerequisite. And this certification and training is not a prerequisite for any other certification in our portfolio. So what's covered? What's covered in this content? I'll go briefly through at a high level, and then I'll go through each of these sections in more detail in subsequent slides. So, and by the way, the fundamentals is referred to, and you'll hear me refer to it throughout this presentation, as SC900 or just the fundamentals. But SC900 basically covers 4 functional groups. And these are the statements that you see in blue on the slide. And beneath that are the specific objectives. And the percentages you see there represent the weighting in terms of coverage on the exam from a certification perspective. Now, here you see the first one, right? And this is a functional group that, although it's small in terms of objectives and weighting, these topics really set the groundwork of understanding for the next 3 groups that focus on the Microsoft solutions. And then you have the functional groups that talk about the area of identity and security and compliance. And again, I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail, but I also want to call out something that's, again, by design. If you notice how everything's written, they all start with the verb describe. And that's very intentional. As a fundamentals, this is really a knowledge-based course, whereas the role-based courses will focus more on implementation and configuration. Now, that said, the training material that's associated with the fundamentals does include availability of labs to enable a hands-on experience for many of the products that are listed on here. So let's start with the functional groups around the concepts. Here you see the topics that are included, right? And what you'll learn here are things like zero trust, right? The 3 tenets of zero trust: verify explicitly, least privileged access, assume breach, and how to think about these across the different pillars that are shown on that slide, right? So identities, networking, data, and you could see them there. And that's just one of the concepts. There's shared responsibility, model, defense in depth, and much more. But understanding the concept of zero trust is really important because it extends throughout the entire digital estate and serves really not just as a security philosophy, but also it serves as an end-to-end strategy based on those pillars. And to give just a real life example of how important this concept and all the other ones are, but I want to specifically call out zero trust in this case, is in May of last year, the White House issued an executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity. And this is the publicly available document that you could find. This executive order required that the head of each agency basically develop a plan to implement a zero trust architecture within 90 days of when that order was issued. So this isn't just some fancy marketing buzzword, right? This is real business and government necessity. When you think about identity, one of the key concepts focuses around identity as a new security perimeter, right? The traditional perimeter-based security model, one where the connection to the corporate network is done within the confines of an office building, is simply not enough, and quite frankly, it's antiquated, right? I'm right now delivering this presentation from the comfort of my own home office, right? I'm at home. You can work from pretty much anywhere and from a variety of different devices. So now the user or the device or the application, whatever is needing access to the network at any given moment, regardless of where it is, becomes that perimeter. And this is a real key concept that you'll see when you think about the next functional groups, and I'll talk more about that. And then when it comes to compliance, understanding key concepts of data residency, data sovereignty, and privacy, these are all critical concepts to understand when you consider that the cloud spans the world, right? For example, Microsoft's cloud infrastructure has over 200 data centers around the globe and 60 plus data center regions with data spread across 35 countries. So really understanding data residency, data sovereignty, privacy, and the compliance associated with that is really important. And the concepts that we cover here are really at the core of the solutions that you'll get introduced in the next few functional groups I'm going to talk about now. So then the second functional group is all around Azure Active Directory. And this is part of the Microsoft Entra, which is the family of Microsoft Identity and Access Management solutions. If we come back to the point around identity as the new security perimeter, the security perimeter of the enterprise, like I said, is not defined by the physical boundaries, but rather by the identity of those things that require access to the enterprise. And I use the word things intentionally, right? Because that could be users as well as applications, processes, devices. So identity is not just also about authentication, it's also about the process to verify someone, what level of access they need. So it's not just about the authentication, which is, is someone or something who they claim to be, but also that level and access of authorization. What are they authorized for? Administrators need to manage the identity lifecycle across the entire enterprise landscape. And this is something that businesses of any size need to manage. And Microsoft Azure AD is really a leader in this space. Azure AD, just to kind of put this in context, manages more than 1.2 billion identities and processes over 8 billion authentications every day. Right? And identity and access management are really a cornerstone of an organization's security practice because it always starts with authentication and authorization. It was interesting. I was listening to one of the Microsoft Ignite sessions that was held last week. The Vice President of Security for Microsoft presented, Vasu Jakal, and she shared that there are over 921 password attacks per second, and that's nearly doubled the frequency from a year ago. And so once a device is compromised, it only takes about an average, about an hour and 42 minutes for an attacker to begin moving laterally within a corporate network. So when you look at all these different factors, organizations of any size have a very strong motivation to have people that really have the skills and the tools that can help protect them in this area. Now, this functional group, you get really introduced to the capabilities of Azure AD. So, if identity and access management is an area of interest, a role that you want to pursue, then there's also the SE300, which is really focused on identity and access management solutions in much more detail. So that's on the identity functional group. The third objective domain, we describe the capabilities of Microsoft solutions. Right? This covers both Azure and Microsoft 365. And here again, as you go through learning about each of these topics, you can begin to see how it relates to the concepts that you covered in the first functional group. So if we think back to zero trust and the 6 pillars as an example, in this group, you'll learn how Azure security capabilities allow you to secure your network through the use of network security groups and Azure Firewall, right? How can you protect your data through encryption and access to your VMs? So as you go through the different solutions and features, you can tie it back to how it can enable a zero trust strategy. And that's just one example, right? With security management in Azure, you also learn about Microsoft Defender for Cloud and cloud security posture management, which is really important because it gives you the opportunity to scan your network and resources to give you a score on your security posture and make recommendations on how to improve that posture. These are just a few of the topics that are covered in this lesson. You're also introduced to Sentinel, which is really that end-to-end and integrated threat protection capabilities, which allows you to begin to start collecting data, detecting threats, investigating, and responding. And the beauty with Sentinel is it includes connectors to enable protection across other vendor solutions and clouds, right? So Sentinel integrates with Microsoft 365 Defender, of course, our XDR solution, or extended detection and response. And so in the fundamentals, you really begin to get introduced to these solutions. They're all integrated and help security operations teams really to be more efficient and effective by delivering these intelligent and integrated security capabilities that, by the way, employ the power of AI and automation, which is really important because when you're dealing with security and the breaches and the challenges that I talked about at the beginning, you really need to make sure you're working with AI and automation tools to enable the users to be able to focus on the remediation and getting things back online. And so these topics also are covered in much greater depth in SE 200, which is focused on the security operations analyst role. So that's on the security functional group. Let me move on to the third one. I'm sorry, the fourth one. And the fourth one is really all about Microsoft compliance solutions, right? Microsoft runs on trust, right? At the core of this are Microsoft privacy principles. These principles really shape the way that our products and services are designed to ensure you as customers have the information you need to make choices regarding what data is collected, how it's collected, and why, right? You also learn about the Service Trust Portal, which provides documentation about Microsoft's compliance to regulatory and industry requirements. As an organization, our Microsoft Cloud is subject to those regulatory and industry-specific requirements. And here you could find the documentation about the tests and the audits done. And just like Microsoft is subject to privacy and regulatory requirements for the data in the Microsoft Cloud, organizations also need to manage that for their own data. All organizations, be they small or large, are dealing with sensitive data of some form, right? Whether that's PII, that is governed by privacy and government regulations. They have intellectual property information, whether that's information on their development plans, cost of goods, whatever it may be. The net of it is that really the data is the lifeline of an organization. So being able to protect that data and ensuring compliance and privacy regulations are met is really critical to the sustainability of an organization. And by the way, this isn't just about protecting data against external threats, but also internal threats, right? When it comes to data, there's this mind-boggling statistic I like to share. IDC has predicted that the global data will grow to more than 175 zettabytes by 2025. And to be honest with you, I don't know how many zeros there are in a zettabyte. I stopped counting after 20. But to put that in context, that's 175 trillion. That's trillion with a T, 1 gigabyte USB drive. So it's really mind-boggling, right? But now think about this in the context of our own data needs and data requirements. If you're in the market, for example, for a new mobile phone or a laptop computer, the first thing you're probably going to look at is the storage capacity. And I looked at the storage capacity for the iPhone as an example, and they range from 128 gigabytes as pretty much the smallest capacity for one of the newer phones to up to a terabyte. And that's for a phone, right? If you're looking to buy a new laptop, you're probably looking at a disk drive that's about 1 terabyte at least, right? If you have a subscription to Microsoft 365, you get a terabyte of cloud storage as part of your subscription. Now imagine business users who are working on a range of devices, right, and storing data in the cloud. How do you protect all of that data, right? In this section, in this functional group, you get introduced to the Microsoft solutions that can really help organizations know and protect and govern that data. Right, and you can see here an example of the different topics covered with insider risk, information protection and governance, Microsoft Purview. So a lot of content here as well. Again, it introduces you to this, the different solutions. And like in the other functional groups, There's also a more detailed training that's available if this is an area of interest that you want to pursue as part of your learning journey, and that's the SE 400 content and certification, go into a lot more detail on Microsoft's information protection solutions. So a lot of material covered here. Again, it's introductory level. You get introduced to the wide variety of solutions. And again, there are hands-on labs associated with this training content, so people can be very familiar and actually play with the system, feel it, get to know it better. Now, hopefully that gives you a little bit of context on what's covered. But I think it's worth also spending just a few minutes on the process that we at Microsoft follow when we develop new certifications and the associated training. And it really all starts with a job task analysis, or a JTA. Right? This is the process where we work to identify the tasks required of someone that's in a given role. In the case of fundamentals, there's not really a specific role, it's a much broader audience, but the JTA is really focused on identifying the competencies that someone in that target audience needs to have. And that JTA process can be anywhere from 3 days to a week. And what's important here is we also work with subject matter experts, not just internal to Microsoft, but also external to Microsoft. So across the SMEs, across the security industry. And this JTA process then informs the content development as well as the certification content, the exam content. Now this next slide, I know it's a really busy slide, but I wanted to show it because I think it's very reflective of the rigor that Microsoft applies in creating and maintaining a certification. Some things to highlight, right? The exam objective domain, that's really the list of tasks that are measured in the exam. And this is made available for all our exams. You can find this on Microsoft Learn. You can see the skills outline document. It establishes the set of skills that candidates must demonstrate to be considered qualified to perform in that job task, right? Or in the case of the fundamentals, in that competency area, right? The beta exam. This is a really critical quality check that happens before an exam can become generally available. And then, of course, the process doesn't stop there, right? It's once an exam is live, there's a whole process of maintaining and sustaining that content. And I'm just covering a few of the highlights here. There's this, not doing it justice, quite frankly. But when it comes to the maintenance and sustainment, with role-based certifications, right, those associate and expert level, those exams get reviewed every 2 months. The fundamentals, what I've been speaking about, that exam gets reviewed every 3 months. And the JTA happens yearly or sooner if needed, right? So that whole job task analysis process that I talked about gets refreshed annually or sooner if needed, right? And if there's any issue with the training content, as content developers, I can go in and address a change in the content that I manage and own almost immediately, right? I don't have to wait for 3 months to fix something on. If there's something that's either wrong or a link is broken or whatever, I can change that immediately. And the reality is that these 3 slides don't really do this justice, right, in terms of the rigor, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of a sense of the process that Microsoft employs when creating and maintaining the content in the exam to ensure credibility of the cert in the industry. Because when you earn a Microsoft cert, it means something, right? And that's, I think, really important, both as a learner and someone who's taking certs as well. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions before I pass it back to you, Marquez.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Yeah, no questions yet. I guess we can cover this while we're waiting. So what's the next step? Once the webinar concludes, a member of our team will contact you via email to share a link to the webinar recording, as well as links to our scheduled security courses. As you can see, we have the SC100, AZ500, SC300, and a few more. These courses are open to any individual that are interested in getting certified. And if you want to train your team, you can reach us via email, phone, social media, or live chat on our website to schedule a dedicated course or hackathon. A member of our team will be happy to meet with you to help determine which certifications and services can best serve your organization. And that's perfect timing. Looks like we have a question. So someone's asking, what's the renewal requirement, if any?
Okay, so on the renewal process, fundamentals, that's a great question, by the way, so thank you. The fundamentals itself doesn't have a renewal process. However, the associate level and the expert level certifications, and this is true for all of Microsoft certifications, do have a renewal process. And that depends, there's a process that's defined on Microsoft Learn if you go to the certifications page. You'll be able to see the details. What'll happen is it's actually an assessment that's done. It's an unproctored assessment. It's short, but it maintains your certification. And typically that announces that the learner will be notified, hey, up to 6 months in advance, hey, your certification is up for renewal in the next 6 months, so you can begin to take the renewal for an associate. Again, that's associate and expert level certifications have the renewal process. The certifications are good for 2 years, so as long as you take that renewal assessment within the time frame, you're good. If you exceed the amount of time, then you have to basically take the exam again. And again, there's a lot of great information on the certification page on Microsoft Learn, and that's aka.ms/learn, where you can see the details of the certification renewal process. There is, in fact, I'm gonna see if I can do this here. If I just pulled up the Learn page and you could see Microsoft renewal. So there's quite a bit of content here on the certifications page of Microsoft Learn about the renewal process. Okay, so yeah, this is aka MS Learn, and under certifications, you can see a tab on certification renewals. So hopefully that helps. Any other questions?
Looks like we do have another question. Hello, is this session being recorded and will the slides be shared? This session will be recorded and it will be available in our Microsoft Cloud shows on Opsgility.com. We typically don't share the slides, but we can reach out to you afterwards. All right, I don't see any other questions. So I think it's safe to say, thanks again, Cecilia, for your help. We really appreciate it. Liz, thanks for helping out behind the scenes. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.